Earlier today, I had the privilege of sitting down with Bryan Mason, president of Pivot Cycles. We talked about what it takes to scale a premium brand in a fiercely competitive, economically viable, and deeply passionate industry. From managing more than 100 employees across 3 continents to navigating tariffs, currency swings, and founder succession, Bryan shares the real-world challenges and lessons of modern leadership. We talk about global growth and economic pressures, team development, and the mindset shifts required to stay bold in a shifting market. This episode's loaded with insight for anyone running a company, building a legacy, or just trying to keep the wheels turning. By the time we're finished, you'll never look at your bike or your business the same way again. Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, sponsored by Progeny Coaching. This is the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we'll dive into the wins, the lessons, and the failures that make our legacies worth living. Today, I'm happy to welcome Bryan Mason, president of Pivot Cycles. Bryan, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And this is going to be a good conversation because, as we found in just the lead in here, there's a bunch we can talk about.
Absolutely.
So I want to jump into something right away that's kind of intriguing to me about the cycle industry. We've talked a little bit about, some of the players in it and that kind of stuff. It seems pretty small and almost like a very tight-knit group. Do you know everybody in the industry? Do they kind of know who you are? And what does that mean to your business?
I don't think anyone would say that they know everyone, but it's certainly a small enough industry that the whole 7 degrees of separation. It might be 1 degree of separation more often than not.
That's funny.
Industry, and so we tend to know. It tends to be very small, incestuous. It's typically lots of times it's not how are you, it's where are you. We kind of bring that trend a little bit at Pivot and have a lot of employees who've been with us a long time, but it's absolutely really a small industry. We hire people from competitors and from suppliers often, and so it's fun in that you go and you see friends, or ex coworkers, and you generally have a shared passion. That's why you're doing this in general, and it's really a unique and fun, but creates its own challenges. You almost can't do anything without someone else knowing that you're considering doing it. So, but it's fun. Yeah, we enjoy it, and you get used to it with some time.
Very cool. Now, I caught the little bit that you had in there. Have you kind of broken the record there a little bit, or broken the typical happening, which is people go from one place to another? How do you create stickiness in your employees at Pivot?
Wow. Yeah. I'd like to say we have great leadership, but it's probably not just that. Hopefully that's part of it. We work really hard to create a culture where we work as a team, where we try to be open, welcoming, and we really win together. Everyone has a voice. We're not a tiny company. We have 100 employees here, 25 in Germany, another dozen or so in Taiwan. And so it's hard, but we try to make sure we hear everyone. And then our goal is to make sure that every year we're trying to find something else that we can offer. So we've grown, paid time off over the years and employee benefits and things like that where we can. And we try to do a little bit more every year and try to create a culture where they feel like they can come in and win. And we really enjoy, I think too, our executive leadership team, me excluded, are great examples. They work hard. I work hard, but it is a remarkable team, and they work hard and they care about their staff, and we consider our staff in almost every decision we make and how it will affect them.
Well, and that's helpful too. I think people underestimate the emphasis on collaboration of bringing people into those decisions. Sometimes, especially when we're starting a business when it's younger, we get in that habit of feeling as if we have to be the decision maker at all times, instead of surrounding ourselves with people that are just as good, if not better, at making those same decisions and allowing them to do what they're very good at.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you have people who prove that they can do well, we try to promote them. So, I mean, we've watched, customer service reps grow into, warranty roles and into, social media roles and systems administrators. And so we do what we can to try to, take our staff and as we grow, them come with us and grow with us and their responsibilities.
Good. Good for you. So you talk about Germany, you talk about Taiwan. Um, Give me a little idea about some of those that movement overseas. What was the spark to it, and what were the benefits to you of doing so?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's becoming more and more important as the trade barriers have actually gotten stronger over the last
Sure.
several months. And so that's been an interesting thing to navigate. But, in Taiwan, that was always, a lot of the cycling industry production has been done in Taiwan for really almost more than my entire career. And it's consistently been something that's driven to Taiwan. And so we've had a lot of Asian source product for many, many years. And so having someone there, boots on the ground, that can go and visit the factories, that can be involved, that can get to other production in different parts of Asia as well, that's a big thing from a quality control perspective. We believe it's much easier to fix a problem before it floats halfway across the world. And we've landed and paid tariffs and duties and then have to send it back. And so having someone that is a pivot employee in the factories following our QC process before it ever leaves the factory has really cut down on waste, and kept our product more refined. And so that's been a huge part, and that was the original driver for our Asian facility in Taichung. And then the German market, Europe's a huge cycling market. I mean, the amount of
Yep.
brands that are in Germany and the bikes per capita are exponentially high. And so in Europe, you kind of need one of two. You either need to have a strength in Germany or a strength in the UK or both. Those tend to be kind of the drivers and trendsetters. And for us, it was important to be present in Europe. And, going through a distributor has its pluses and its minuses, but we wanted to kind of cut out the amount of chains from pivot to an end consumer. And so we were able to cut out some links by just us selling direct to the dealer, marketing directly to those customers. And so that was the emphasis on creating an office in Germany. And so today we do have a pretty large facility there, 10,000 square meters, so 33,000 square feet or so. And we do production, quality control, sales. And Germans culturally, they like to have another German. They love German engineering. They love, but mountain biking was born in the United States, and so we have a lot of emphasis. And to have someone who is building the bikes in Germany and selling the bikes and customer service, it's just a different connection. And so it's been an important piece, and that office has been going since 2018 now. So we're in our 7th year, through a lot of iterations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a hidden advantage that people don't even remember a lot of times when they go overseas, and that is stuff is happening around the clock. For something's
Absolutely.
happening for your business every hour of the day of every day of the year, and the ability for that to continue happening day after day, and it's not all revenue generating, but it's something that's happening towards revenue generating one way or another. So I think that creates an advantage. Of course, it creates some challenges across time zones and
Yeah, your
some of
inbox
those.
doesn't stop either for 20.
Inbox doesn't stop either. Yeah,
That's a remarkable one. If I realized how often I'd be sending emails at 11 p.m. and then 4:30 a.m., maybe I would have thought twice about. Maybe we would have thought twice about this. Yeah.
that's funny. So that's the good part of being overseas.
Yeah.
Give me some of those challenges, some of the things you didn't really realize, other than your inbox,
Well, yeah, the
other
inbox
things you
is
didn't
certainly
realize.
one. For me, I head up directly. I am the connection with our office in Stuttgart, and so I'm in early generally to get more overlap, and that's kind of a requirement. I mean, we're
Sure.
either it's either 3 or 4 in the afternoon, depending on the time of year, and time changes when we get in, unless we're coming in early to be available. And so me and some of our operations staff arrive early. That creates some of its own challenges. That lack of communication is always a challenge. Culturally, it's a completely different world in Europe. I mean, work-life balance isn't a thing in Germany because it's just, kind of life balance. I mean, the average German has, I think it's 30 days of vacation, 14 days of holiday. And so, and it's a completely different mentality. When they're gone, they're gone. And so they are on vacation. And there are advantages to that, absolutely. But when you're a small team, like 25 employees, and you're running a business, it can create its challenges. For everything. And we have to be cognizant that we're different as well, and we shouldn't expect them to be living our culture, right? And so there's always that, level of trying to be as empathetic and understanding as possible, while still trying to make sure we're keeping a pivot culture, right? Which is kind of like a get it done, do whatever it takes. And so it's an interesting challenge, honestly, and we deal with it every day.
I think that sparks another one in me, which is pivot culture versus in-country pivot culture, right? we have global. Is there such a thing as a global pivot culture that every global employee of Pivot would say, "This is why I work here"? And then is there in-country ones that supersede or substitute for that pivot culture?
Yeah, that was an interesting exercise. We're actually we're finalizing our core values, and this company or this kind of duality or plurality in being multinational corporation or business has led us to really needing this, right? Where we have to make sure that we define who we are at a global level at the highest tier, and that's what needs to drive our decisions. And we need to be sensitive to that. So we actually received input from our German leadership, our U.S. leadership, to make sure that everyone had an input in what we define as our core values, so that we can live them together. But yeah, we do our best to make sure that they're aligned, right? But there have to be small tweaks. I don't think it's a problem saying something like hard work or effort is a core value, but what that means, it might be slightly different from employee to employee, even, right?
Yeah.
But certainly from culture to culture. And Germans work incredibly hard. They just work when they're on vacation, they're on vacation.
They just
So
work 335 days really hard, and the other 30 they're good to go. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting and fun challenge, and it is a balance between how we need to be respectful and reasonable, that there are cultural differences. At the same time, the company needs to be the company at a global level, and we need to use the same values.
Yeah, I think that's when you talk about the strength of your leadership team. I think that's one of the things that it's constantly going to be battling with, is that in-country culture versus global culture. All right, so I've always said on this podcast, I will stay apolitical. I'm going to maintain that. We're going to have a non-political discussion of economic factors. Clearly, in 2025, the cycle industry, among several others that are built overseas, struggles with some of the economic factors that have been brought into play here. What has that done for you, and how do you get by that with a customer? Talk me through some of those conversations, both in the company and with your communication with your customers.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows it's happening, right? Everyone knows that there is now an additional cost that we have, and we have a couple options, really, right? We have to pay the government if we want to get this product in here. So we have a couple options. We have to pay it. The dealer, our wholesaler, has to pay it, or the end consumer, or all of us can share in it, right? I mean, in some way or another. And so that has been an interesting challenge. I mean, we came off of, during the pandemic, an unprecedented demand. And this, everyone wanted to do outside. And so you had just this huge demand, and then we suffered a bullwhip effect, and there was too much product in the supply chain, which led to large discounting. Well, in 2025, really the market is pretty balanced. The over inventory for the most part has reached an equilibrium or a safe level for most companies. Those companies that unfortunately weren't going to make it didn't make it at this point. And so we were really excited for 2025. And very quickly, we had the initial Liberation Day, and tariffs became an instant topic. Being a global company, our CEO and my counterpart was in Asia and visiting some of our factories. And so we just instantly had to spring to action and make plans. We priced our entire catalog for the initial tariffs that were threatened. And within a week, all of that led to another repricing, right? And we made the choice early on to try to do our best to share the cost. So we basically said, look, we're going to make a little bit less margin. The dealer is going to make a little bit less margin, and the consumer is going to have to pay a little bit more. But we felt like with the market in equilibrium, that was the safest way forward and the best way forward. And so we kept a pretty moderate price increase, in my opinion. And so we felt pretty good about it. And then and then the deals were made, and we had to reprice everything again. Unfortunately, we did have to pass the majority of that on to the whole. I mean, we've already absorbed a good chunk of it from the original one. And so that one was passed more through. And that has, how that's affected us is we've constantly been dealing with structural and how we can do this, and vendor discussions of how we can negotiate any additional savings up front before it gets imported, because that saves us money.
Sure.
And saves the end consumer money. But also just, how do you control and explain that to your customers that the bike that they could have bought in January, even though it's all the same, now costs 10, 15% more. That's a hard thing. And we are in the premium space, but bikes are not inexpensive. Some people will look at it and say, I could buy a motorcycle. One of our competitors just released a bike that costs more than an entry-level car. And so,
wow.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So it's been hard. And, we have to plan, what if that reduces demand? We feel like we have a better price elasticity than others. So we feel that we can probably get through it okay, but it's a constant question of, at what point do people just decide, I'm not buying a new bike this year, and let's see what happens. And it has certainly, we're certainly seeing the disposable income seem to pull down a little bit. So regardless of politics, that is what it's created for us.
Yeah.
A lot of volatility, a lot of plan A, plan B, plan C, and unfortunately, lower margins for us, and at the same time, higher prices for an end consumer. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the lesson here for anybody in regardless of industry, right? Is if there are economic factors that can impact you, it's how if they went up by this, could we handle it, right? At what point do we have to start having those conversations with our clients? Whether it's a pet sitting company where the pet sitters have to drive all the time and gas prices go through the roof. Do we raise prices because of gas? Well, what happens when gas comes back down? Do we have to lower our prices again? I told you the story just before this about a client of mine, former client of mine that I had here in the Pacific Northwest, who does custom doors and windows. And, he does really outstanding work. People love his work. So they were 6, 8, 9 months out with booking his time. Issue was a handful of years ago that we all remember, when lumber went through the roof. Well, he had priced them here, and now the lumber starts to creep up and surpass that. He's like, what do I do? How do I go back to these people and tell them what they thought they could get at this price? I'm going to have to double it. It's a conversation.
Well, we ran into that during the pandemic as well. We had so much demand, and because there was so much demand, everything was getting more expensive. Raw materials and some of our vendor prices would go up, and this kind of continued on and through. And so we had that same thing. We'd have people wait, 9 months, sometimes 18 months for a bike, and then the price would be different. And it's a hard discussion, and we had to have those same discussions. But to your point, tariffs aren't the only thing that raise prices. There's a lot of things that COVID did the same thing, and created its own disruptions in the supply chain. And yeah, we've been working hard to try to mitigate that. But yeah, eventually we still have to make a margin to protect our company, and to make sure that we're going to be here next month and next year. Right. And so, yeah, you eventually get to that point.
Well, it's that law of supply and demand that we all heard about in microecon that we said, no, that's bullshit. That's not really the case. And then we get out here and we live it, and it's like, oh, damn, I guess it really does exist. Right?
Yeah. My undergraduate degree is in economics, and it's funny to see all this theory then happen in real life. And yeah, there's been multiple ways to handle this tariff. I mean, some of our competitors are just adding a tariff line item. So we didn't raise the price. You buy it at this, and then this is what the tariff costs. So you buy it at X, the tariff costs Y, and that's great. And we thought about doing that, but what happens if the tariffs go away, or they get higher, or they get lower? I mean, the dealer or our wholesaler purchased that, right? And he paid that tariff, and we paid
That's
that.
where I think there's an advantage to that, honestly, Brian. I mean, because you've got that extra line item, and as that tariff goes down, people see you bring that line item down. Now, if you make up for that by grabbing margin back elsewhere, then you do. That's part of the law of pricing as well. But that the ability of that line item is, as that goes away, or you can pull it out. And if you're tracking it, if you're keeping track, and you go to the accounting side of this, if you're keeping track of that tariff and you're taking the money from that tariff and setting it aside and understanding the true margin without that, then you're managing to that true margin, and you're not even taking into account the tariff. And then as it goes up and down, it doesn't matter to you. You understand what your margins are without it.
Yeah, I mean, our concern is what happens when it goes away, but our wholesaler paid it, right? And so the customer goes, I don't want the bike that's on your floor. I want a new one, because the new one may not have the tariff, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that's on their floor. So that's also a challenge. And so, yeah, being able to navigate this, and I think the biggest problem has just been the uncertainty, right? I mean, if we had said this is what the plan is from moment one, or we had some time to prepare, then we could have definitely handled it well. But the key for us has been communication with our dealers, and doing our best to be transparent of what's affecting us. And then it's also the other part that's worthy of this conversation, or a worthy part of this conversation. It's really affected currencies, and we are a global company, and we buy things in Japan and things in Taiwan, and unfortunately, and we also sell to and have European products. So you're talking about us being a U.S. company buying some things in euros, some things in NTD, some things in yen, and all of those have fluctuated at a very high level, and the dollar's lost a significant portion of value, and so that complicates it further. The less that the dollar is being used, and the weaker it is to the NT, the Taiwanese dollar, the more complications that are created. So there's a lot when, to your point, there's a lot of things that happen in monetary policy with one small change that seems small, just has amazing amounts of ripples in the marketplace.
Well, and then to the point about currency, again, that's another rabbit hole we could run down. Do you want to hedge against that currency? Do you start to purchase in this to be? We could talk about that for hours. I'm sure you spend hours looking at it, right? What's the advantage of hedging? Sit with the accountant, sit with your lawyer, sit with what can we say with this contract? Can we say with this purchase or investment, and that, just to kind of level out those hills and valleys for yourself as an organization.
Absolutely. It's a constant, it's a constant discussion. It's something we have to keep a constant eye on, and we have to do what's best. And again, we think about our wholesalers and our end consumers in every decision, and just try to minimize the impact as much as we can, while still being here for them in a year or two or three, and well, hopefully forever, right? That's the ultimate goal.
Well, these are all those things, and we've talked about Legacy Unscripted and where the name came from and all that kind of thing. But these are some of those things you can't imagine when you first get into the business. You can't forecast some of that. Talk to me. Let's go back a little bit to young Brian, who started this business or got into this business. What was it about this industry? What was it about being in this small business environment that you wanted so badly?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I mean, I'm not the founder of Pivot, and
Yep.
our founder is still heavily involved and is still active day to day in the company, Chris Kokalis. But years ago when I entered the bike industry, I chose to turn down a really large company. I had an offer to go work for a large insurance company in their management tract, and I chose to make half the money. Um, and work significantly more hours and have more stress because I just wanted to work in, I just really wanted to work in something I was passionate about.
Yeah.
And, from day one, I remember one of the founders of the company I was working for at the time, my first foray into the bike industry, he said, "Oh no, you're a lifer." Like my first event, he said, "Oh no, you're a lifer. You're going to be in the bike industry forever." And I
That's
think at
funny.
that moment, it kind of hit me, and I was like, "Oh, this is what I want to do." And so young Bryan, basically a year out of college, was like, "Yeah, I want to run a bike company someday." That was my goal. And I moved on to a couple different career paths within the industry. I worked for a helmet manufacturer and doing their sales and marketing, and I started in sales, and so that was a kind of natural transition. And I came to Pivot actually running their U.S. sales. And in my first review, I said, they said it kind of, we do reviews and says, "What's your short and long term goals?" And I said, "Well, my short term goal is to take my boss's job, and my long term goal is to take the CEO's job." And our CEO and founder, Chris, he told me, I think he's like, "At that time when I read it, I thought you were crazy." But through a lot of mentorship, coaching, and just things that I needed to correct to become better, he and the team challenged me, and I eventually ended up within a few years running the global sales. And then a few years later, I ended up in the position that I wanted to be in. And so, yeah, that's how it happened. I'm sure that people have a more glamorous pact or founded their own company,
No,
but
that's terrific.
I to kind of work my way up in the cycling industry from very small company to a medium-sized helmet
Yep.
manufacturer to a, a, a relatively medium slash small size bicycle manufacturer. But I am hoping to stay here forever. I just absolutely love this company and the product, and so it's easy to sell something and to support something that you believe is just the benchmark in the industry.
No, honestly, that's terrific. And the thing I love about it is the vision that the CEO, yeah, he thought you were crazy and that kind of stuff, but the recognition of the potential of a succession plan, and a succession plan years ahead of when he
Mm-hmm.
needed it or wanted it, to be in his leadership in the organization. To, he may not have seen, well, Bryan has the capability to replace this person or that person. Just, can I develop him and see where he goes, right? And watching and keeping an eye on it, and that's an advantage of the small business, of course, right? You go
Absolutely.
into a $2 billion company that's in 26 countries, you're not going to have that vision into the lower level potential. And you have to rely on your in country or in region people to kind of take care of that. But a small business like this, you can recognize that. Um, and for me, it hits them. I did that once. I said that in a job interview, probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever it was.
Well, it had to
I
be
remember,
like you had to
yeah,
be. It had to be 25 or 30 years ago
yeah,
for you.
you didn't have the guts when you got older.
It is what I want to do.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, I was sitting, I think it was around my graduate degree, after my graduate degree. So that would have been 25 years ago. And it was exactly that. I was sitting across from her. She asked me my 5-year plans and what do you want to be doing in 5-year plans? I said, sitting in your chair.
Yeah.
I never got a call back. Funny that happened. Um, but that's the kind of thing you want to do, right? We
Mhm.
want employees, we want people that share the passion we have about our business.
Yep.
And I think that's a demonstration from you of, I want to run a cycle company. If it's going to be here or someplace else, I want to run a cycle company. I think if they saw just a little bit of that craziness, they saw, this is somebody that we can't let go elsewhere because he'll build a company that's going to beat us.
And it's funny that you said it that way, Russ, because I actually did say I'm going to run a bicycle company one day, whether it's yours or someone else's. I'm going to do this. And so yeah, it's funny that you caught that. I don't know I don't think I actually said that in the original in our original discussion, but that's word for word what I said. Yeah.
And I would bet that that's the thinking that you would have, and that's the passion that you would need to be where you are. All right, let's go back to that guy sitting across that table, and we're going to say, Bryan, here you go. Here's your company. What would you tell that guy for lessons learned, and say, here's the things, here's your company, but here's what you're going to need to do to make it successful. What are those lessons that you'd love to tell him?
Whew. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's, we could go over and go down so many
Yeah,
rabbit holes here. One is I think that be a student is an important one, and really I think that that's something that like I've really felt is critical. I read quite a bit. I actually didn't for many years. Actually, to this younger self that I'd be speaking, he was not a reader. And actually, during my master's, when I finished my executive master's, it was something that just kind of, oh, well, it referred to these different, Myers-Briggs or DISC or whatever it ended up being. And then I was like, oh, I should go learn more about that. And I wish that I had another decade where I
yeah,
was trying to be a student as much as I am now, because the amount of things that you can learn. I mean, the worst employees I've ever had, if you're smart, you still learn from them, right? They
yeah,
teach you something. And the best ones, oh my gosh, they're just the amount of wisdom that you can gain from your best and your employees is just it's incredible. And so I wish that I had wanted to be a student of others more, and also just in general the amount. I mean, we were just talking about the psychology of money before we
yeah.
started this.
Great book.
The amount of times I'm referring to different books that I've read and lessons that I've learned, and you can't remember everything, but the things that stick with you tend to be the things that will help you, right? Because those have
Yep.
resonated. So honestly, if I was going back 10 or 15 years, that would be it. Read more, be a student, and realize everyone, there is something to learn from them.
Yep.
And that there is a lot of power in that, I think.
And I think the thing about being, and I think that's a spectacular lesson, and even in its broadest sense, not just whether it's reading, listening to people, learning from people, being open to being coachable, all those kind of things. And I think the critical part about that is, don't assume that you know the things that you're going to need along the way, and try to pick and choose the things that you learn. Just open your mind to anything and everything, because you never know. I tell people that the number one class, I was always a math guy and numbers, and I loved them and all that kind of stuff. The number one class that I use above anything else is the ninth grade grammar class, right? Because I do so much in the written word, so much in emails. Yes, we have AI now, we have Grammarly, we have those guys, but it's not about that. It's about knowing who your voice is and knowing how to write and use that. But you couldn't have told me that. You couldn't have said, if you want to become a success in business someday, this class is going to be the most important thing for you. Yeah, okay. But it is. Just become a student. Just learn how to learn how to open your mind, and just absorb everything around you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's and I think that to that point, learn from my own mistakes. I mean,
Yep.
we all learn from mistakes, but actually taking the time to go, why did this happen this way? And whether it's an employee that we just, we never clicked, or whether it's someone who I felt like had potential and we didn't develop them, or whether I had a conflict or I wasn't patient enough. Like, taking a step back and reflecting on that is critical, if you want to develop as a leader, but also to make sure that people know that you care about them, that you're a human, that you're thinking about those things. And being in cycling, I spend a lot of time on my bike. Still, I've
Yeah.
got bike parts behind me, and the amount of time I spent on a bike just thinking about how I could have had better interactions that day, or how I could have communicated better, or and then just larger scale visions of the company. But that is a huge piece, is taking the time to reflect. And for me, I'm doing it on the bike, but I hope that, one of the other takeaways would be, take that time. I hope everyone takes that time to self-evaluate, and to, identify those areas. I spent a lot of time reading books on empathy because I'm really bad naturally at empathy. I'm a high D or red communicator, and so from your DISC assessments, if you're into those, and so I'm just overly direct, and I don't always take the time to really consider like how am I going to approach this person and what do they need to hear, and so yeah. Anyways, I digress. So those are some takeaways from
No, and it's
my
interesting that you bring that up because it's a challenge I work with a lot of my clients. As you said, I tend to be more direct in my coaching than many are, and because of that, I have clients that migrate to me that love the direct feedback. Well, by nature, they, similar to yourself, aren't necessarily the great leaders from a get behind me, let's go take that hill type of thing, but they aren't necessarily the type of leader who's going to pause halfway up the hill because somebody twisted an ankle. It's just we're going to the top of that hill whether you're coming or not. And there is, when you're running a company, as you well know, as we just talked about, there's a lot of cultural integrations here that we need to consider in doing something of that sort.
Yeah, I love that feedback. And I think that there's times where you do need to just be the person out front leading the charge and
Yep.
leaving that person, for lack of a better word, with a rolled ankle. And there are other times where you need to let others be running to the top of the hill and you
Sure.
need to be back there collecting the injured, right? And that's kind of the hardest part, in my opinion, leadership in general, is knowing when it's right to do one and when it's right to do the other. And so those are the things you catch when you take some time. And if it wasn't for the bike, I would probably never have time to self-reflect. So for me,
That's
that's
funny.
the meditation point. So
Well, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful spot to do it. I've got a client of mine in LA that loves to get out on the bike trails, just go. If you can get a couple hours in on the weekend, I talked to him in the following week and he's just glowing because he's just at peace with who he is because he's let go of all the stuff from the previous week. He's had a chance to think about what's coming, etc. So speaking of that, and we're getting towards the end here, but I'm curious from you, on the horizon, what are those challenges that you see coming, and what are you doing as a business and as an individual to kind of get ready for those?
whew, yeah. Well, we're worried about the global economy right now.
Sure.
I mean, we're seeing some weakening and some softening in many markets. It's not just some jobs that aren't being created or inflation, which from tariffs or any of these things. It's just in general we're worried about a global weakening economy, and
Yep.
so we have to plan for that. And so we'll be more conservative in our spends and in our planning and make sure that we're spending well within our budgets. At the same time, we are doing our best to innovate. I mean, if you're going to spend money, you're going to want to spend it on the best thing available, right? And so we are going to continue to push the innovation, and we did that this year. I mean, we have released 5 new bikes this year, and so we're going to continue to push the innovation to create demand. And then we know in a softening market that we have to be present and top of mind. So we'll work to make sure that we're as effective as we can be and with our marketing and be present. And so, yeah, from a business standpoint, we want to be able to make sure the end consumers are aware of us and be innovative. And then from our planning standpoint, be as conservative as possible if the worst happens, right? If the
Sure.
economy is bad, we need to be there. And that's, Chris and Cindy, our CEO and CFO and founders, have really done a great job always being conservative, and that's left us in a good situation more often than not. It may have inhibited some growth here or there, but it's also kept us from, a lot of our competitors have had some really rough years, and we've managed it and for the most part in a really good way. So those are some of the things we're doing. Maybe that wasn't a great answer, but that's the plan for now.
No, that's good. So one more question for you, and it may have some TNT tied to it. Um, you mentioned Chris, Cindy, the CEO, CFO, founders of the organization. Talk to me about being the president in an organization and the autonomy you have when the founders are still, the office next door, proverbially or really.
Yeah, that's actually been so. First off, there are a ton of benefits. I mean, I have people who have been through it, right?
Yep.
Multiple companies. I mean, I have mentorship around the corner, right? A door away, and that is something that I don't think a lot of executives necessarily have. They may have a peer, they may have a coach, but to just go to someone who's done it, who's seen it all, who's done this in 2 separate bike companies that he's founded over the course of 35 years. I mean, that's a huge blessing and a huge advantage, in my opinion. The challenges are I have to make sure to do decisions that are best for the company, but also that would be the decision that Chris would make more often than not, right? So, and we're aligned on 99% of business, but I also have to think, what would he want and how would he want this done? Because this is his company and he is still involved. And I want to make sure I'm making decisions that are as close to what he would make as possible, right? Luckily, we're aligned and we've worked together for 10 years. So I generally know exactly what he wants.
That's
and
funny.
So I can make those decisions, but it's a challenge. I have to not just think, okay, what do I think about this? Or what, is this the right move for the company? I kind of have to take that secondary check and go, if Chris doesn't agree with this in that 1% of situations, can I justify it? And do I feel strongly enough to say, well, I think you're wrong on this one? And that is the balance, right? And so but I don't think that that's much different from answering to a board, except for the fact that you get mentorship and understanding. I mean, some boards, shareholders, if you spend any time reading The Infinite Game, there's some big differences between publicly held companies and privately held companies. So I have that advantage, and I have a direct line to if I don't know the answer, I don't have to wait, to go to a coach or a board every time. Like I can walk over or make a phone call and we can have a discussion. And and I love that dichotomy. But of course, there's challenges, right, which we've talked about.
Yep.
And so, yeah.
No, that's a great answer. I like it. And shout out to Simon Sinek and Infinite Game. Great book. Another great book.
That. Also, great economic principle. Things undergraduate.
Yes.
It's
that's
a great.
Funny. Anything that I haven't talked about, Bryan, that you want to cover? Want to make sure we get to?
I think we've done a pretty good job. I don't know. If there's anything else that's top of mind, then I'm happy to speak through it. But I think that we've covered most of the things that we thought might be good to touch on. So.
No, I think this has been great. Thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
So that's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't just let it sit. Take action today to build your future. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. And if you've got a story to share or you just want to connect, you know where to find me. Till next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.